I just got back from my trip to New York and DC, and here are some of the videos that I took while I was on my way. We'll just make our way through them. Taking off from Bentonville, Arkansas, early in the morning, and making my way eastward. The sunrise was great, and I was lucky to have a window seat and no other passenger in the seat next to me. So I had two seats all to myself and a perfect view looking out the window at the rolling countryside and little towns as they passed, looking at the interstates and all of the things you can see. And I thought it was pretty cool that the plane I was on is fairly small. So it wasn't flying at a really, really high altitude, which made it possible for me to see quite a bit more of the countryside out the window than I would if it was a bigger jet, which I thought was pretty cool. There was also a moment when I looked down out the window and saw this big quarry, and I was actually able to drive by that same quarry on the road when I was on my way back home. I thought that was pretty cool. It's always interesting looking out the window and seeing all the different things that you wouldn't really be able to appreciate if you were on the ground. But the most interesting thing was coming in and looking at the skyline of New York, going on approach into LaGuardia. Super cool. This is making our way into New York, and if I jump a little bit further ahead here, there we go. What an amazing view to be able to look out and see Manhattan at that altitude. The crazy thing about New York is it's just so big. There's not really any way to take a picture of the skyline of New York because you just can't get the whole skyline of New York into a single camera shot. Like, it's just so spread out and enormous and just at a ridiculous scale. Like, you have several different neighborhoods in New York which are all big enough to be their own cities with their own skylines all to themselves. And it's just a really incredible sort of experience to be able to see that. And I was thinking about what it was like to be there 15 years ago when I went to New York for the first time and saw then the hole in the ground, which was the beginning of the construction of the New World Trade Center, which now is complete. I think there's plans to build one more building there, which will be World Trade Center Tower 2 at some point in the future, but the main tower and complex is pretty much complete, which is certainly an amazing thing to see years later, and certainly puts into perspective how, despite what all the naysayers say, we definitely live in a world filled with progress and dreams, and maybe not everyone's dreams can come true, but certainly New York is great evidence that many people's dreams will and do and have come true, and maybe that's cause for hope. Looking around LaGuardia Airport again, I remember going to LaGuardia Airport a long time ago, and it was so different. I believe it was, if memory serves, a lot more less modern, I shall say. And here, when I went in, it felt like a super modern airport. I think when I was there a decade and a half ago, it hadn't been remodeled, and it seemed a lot more like, you know, stepping into the 80s or something. Some great views of downtown from inside the terminal. And so I got myself a sandwich and a cup of coffee. I think I paid $25 for it. Airport prices, you know, they're pretty expensive, but what are you going to do? Doesn't really matter too much because it's a vacation trip. And I always like to take pictures and videos of people like this, just in their whatever environment they're in, doing their normal things, like walking around and going their ways and being busy. And I think to myself, it's just so crazy, you know, like they're just going about their business, and they don't know that they're kind of part of history, because one day they will be, you know, those old forgotten faces from a century ago, when this is just old footage from a long distant past. Anyways, it was a rather harrowing trip into Lower Manhattan. Got a little rental car that was a Mitsubishi Mirage, which I didn't know I liked those cars until I found one at the rental car place and I got it. It took me like an hour and a half to get from LaGuardia Airport down to Lower Manhattan and park, and that was really a pretty harrowing experience. It was just kind of poetic. Like I had the music playing in the car on YouTube Music, and it started to play Elder Scrolls music while I was in Manhattan trying to make my way through traffic. And it's just a super soothing, calming soundtrack, and I was too busy focused on driving to be thinking about like changing what music I was listening to or anything like that. So I just listened to like Oblivion soundtrack on loop for an hour while I tried to focus on driving and not getting myself into any kind of pickles in the middle of the traffic of downtown New York City. But I did make it down there, no problems, parked. The parking garage was super convenient once I was able to get to the garage, and I was really thankful to have the small car. And then I looked at the memorial there of the 9/11, which is pretty just humbling and impressive to see after all of these years have passed. The reflecting pools, again, super nice, and just a great environment, just seeing everybody kind of hanging out underneath the trees and enjoying that open space in the middle of the city. It is crazy that all those years have passed. Like, what is it? Like 20, almost 25 years now have passed. That's crazy, isn't it? I always wonder, like, it seems like maybe when the World Trade Center got attacked and 9/11 happened, we had this feeling that, like, the world is messed up and it's on this downward trajectory, and it's just like, it's going to get worse. And then there was the economic crash of 2008, and there was just this pessimism that kind of started to become more pervasive. And we started to see that trend toward more divisive politics and people flopping back and forth and getting more crazy. And, you know, it just seems like we never came back. And then COVID came and got even worse and stuff. But then by the same measure, you go to places like this, you see it all, and you think, man, like, how can you be cynical when you look up at such great, impressive constructs and you know, I couldn't have words to say just how impressive it is to look down over New York City out of the rebuilt World Trade Center and, you know, see, you know, how far we have been able to come, and makes you think, like, it's so easy to go down the rabbit hole of getting cynical and, you know, bitter about things, and, you know, frustrated about little stuff that gets on your nerves, or believing that the world is, you know, not gonna work out, or just thinking like the worst is gonna happen or whatever. And then you realize, you know, I guess maybe there's a lot more good in the world than there is bad, and we shouldn't be so fixated on believing that you know, the glass is half empty. It's so much better to just have a more optimistic approach to life. And I think that's definitely a takeaway that I kind of gathered thinking about all of this stuff and seeing the sights of the city. There's this cool video that plays, and then the wall raises up, and then you can see out, and there is the city. Pretty cool. Anyways, you know, spent a lot of time up there just looking out and taking photos and taking videos, and I thought it's actually interesting because I brought my good camera that I've had for years, and I got the new Samsung phone, which has a great zoom up to 10x, and it takes good video, it takes good pictures, and for the first time, like, now I have a cell phone which takes good photos and videos at a level where, like, no, is it perfect? No, but I don't usually wind up using my bigger point and shoot camera anymore, just because my cell phone does a better job and it's more convenient. So I did take a few photos with my regular camera, but for the greater part, I just use my cell phone. And now I'm at a point where I don't even know if I'll ever really be bringing my camera with me anymore. I'll probably just be going places with the cell phone, because the cell phone is more versatile and you can just do more things with it, and you have it with you all the time. And I've come to the realization that it's more convenient to have like a discrete device that just is with you all the time and does a reasonably good job just in general. I might invest in something like a GoPro, or maybe at some point look into like a drone or something like that. Like, there are some things that you can do that a cell phone can't do, but not so much the cameras with a big lens that are fragile, and then you can only take them certain places, or it's inconvenient to carry them, or you know, whatever. It's always interesting to be able to look down from a tall building and just see people going about their lives kind of like ants, or looking at the city as if it were like a Sim City game of City Skylines or something. There's that AT&T building with no windows in it, data center for communications, also possibly government spying. At least that's what the rumor is. It's interesting how there's an AT&T building with no windows in every city, like just there. Yeah, supposedly they like to wiretap everyone's phones, I think. I don't know. Maybe that's just a conspiracy theory. It ain't true. Or maybe it is true. I mean, it wouldn't really be that crazy, would it? The government likes to know what people are doing. Anyways, there's a boat, big yachts. I always think about how crazy it is. Like, people are so poor, and then other people are so rich. And that's the hard thing, you know? Like, you go to a place that is the top of the world, and then you realize so many people struggle just to make ends meet, and that disparity between the lavishness of the top and the struggle of the people below. It reminds you of like the serfdom of the people living in the castles and the peasants living out in the slums. Sometimes I wonder, like, what is the solution to that? I don't know. Anyways, that was the view from the World Trade Center. So I went back down, and at that point it was like 3 in the afternoon, and I thought it would be super cool to walk down to Times Square and hang out in the city, but then I realized, well, hotels are expensive in the middle of Manhattan, and I don't want to spend like $500, $600, $700 for a night at a hotel in Manhattan. And I don't know how safe it is in the middle of the city as it gets later. So, you know, I just kind of figured, all right, well, I guess I'll try to beat rush hour out of here. And so I hit the road, got out of New York, and made my way down toward Washington, D.C., spent the night, and then the next morning, got up in the morning, went over to the Capitol and looked around Washington, D.C. Like, unlike Manhattan, it was very easy to find parking and to get out there. Super safe, super clean. There's all these National Guard people were all just out and about different places, and, you know, no shortage of law enforcement and all that stuff. So no feeling that Washington, D.C. was not safe. It feels very safe to be hanging around the government areas and the tourist attractions in Washington, D.C. Again, a pretty humbling and awe-inspiring experience to go and see the capital city of the United States. And just like New York is America's biggest city, Washington, D.C. is America's most important city when it comes to being powerful and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, like, I guess if I was going to think about what I've learned here, it's that we hear about all this Trump stuff, but, you know, Washington, D.C. is not Donald, and people want to say that the president is, you know, like a god or like the devil or something, but being there for a little bit and seeing all those buildings and all that history, and I didn't even have time to begin to really pay too much attention to all of the finer details, but just to capture the atmosphere of it and the weight of the history, and to see all of the people there experiencing it and looking around and stuff. Yeah, it makes you think a little bit about like suppressive policing and the degree to which we have high security and we have all of the, you know, government surveillance and stuff. And you wonder, like, we talk about democracy and we talk about freedom, but it's kind of weird in a way to, like, you look at the steps, you can't go up the steps of the Capitol building on the front because those have been closed ever since, I think, 9/11 or something. So you can't get super close to the front of the building there. And then you go around the back and you go down to the visitor center, which is super cool, free to get in and lovely inside and all that. But then you have, you know, like, you have school children there taking their pictures on the steps, and you have people standing there with like long guns down there. Like, I think I took a picture of them just because it's so crazy in a way. Like, you got that, you know, Suburban up there with surveillance equipment on it, and you got these people there to come learn about democracy while you got these boys out here with all their guns. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, they're just guys doing their thing, but you kind of wonder, I mean, like, that's kind of a weird message, isn't it? come learn about democracy while you're under extreme surveillance with people with guns surrounding you. I don't know. Makes you wonder, like, what kind of a weird dystopia do we live in? I don't know. I guess life is filled with good and bad and all sorts of shades in between. Now, I did think this statue's cool because it is the statue of the top of the Capitol Dome. So that's what the statue on top of the Capitol Dome actually looks like. But you never really see it up close. But it's like the goddess of America, and she's wearing this headdress, which is like a eagle wearing Indian feathers or something. Anyway, kind of cool, but a beautiful little visitor center, and I thought that was nice to go in there and just kind of see all those exhibits and history of the Capitol and all the people milling around in there. A lot of interactive stuff, and pretty great as a free experience to be able to pop in. And when you look at all that stuff, it does kind of make you think. Think about like North Korea or something. Like, what do they have? And that's humbling when you realize just how much good we have in our country to be able to go and learn about the democratic process and to celebrate those things and to have the freedom of movement and stuff. Even being in Washington, D.C., walking around, you realize, there's National Guard there. There's a lot of Capitol Police and stuff, but we also have this absence of fear. Like, maybe there's a guy over there with a gun. Maybe there's a bunch of officers standing there, but nobody's actually afraid of them. Like, that's the thing, like you can go and say anything you want, pretty much. You can do just about anything you want. I mean, as long as you're not doing harm, and you're not going to ever feel afraid of the government in the United States. I mean, people will say, well, that's not true. But the reality is, it is true. We do have a lot of freedom. We can go places when we want and how we want, and we can say things that we maybe believe but other people don't want to hear, and maybe people say something nasty on Reddit or something, but the truth is we don't live in fear in our society, and that is a huge blessing. And it's something I thought about, like walking around Washington, D.C. and seeing all of the law enforcement and stuff and realizing, they're there. But what a difference it is between law enforcement in a free country and law enforcement in a true dictatorship. And a lot of people will talk about dictatorship, and they really don't know what they're talking about, because true dictatorship, if you were to go to a place where people don't have liberty, then you would totally change your tune, because there is no comparison between Nazi Germany and the United States. Like people want to say, well, look at what Trump said or something. I think says stupid, crazy things, and I don't believe in some of the stuff that seems to be happening these days, and I believe we should always be wary of that slippery slope into totalitarianism, and we're never too far away. But in terms of reality, life is pretty good when it comes to our way of governing ourselves here in this country, and that's something I think we should keep in our mind when we start to get cynical about the state of the world or the state of the country. Like Warren Buffett said once, just being born in the United States is like winning some sort of a lottery. gives you a chance that so many people in the world don't have a chance for. And when you realize that, then I guess we need to be thankful for having that chance if we're living in the United States or living in one of the free countries where people can do as they wish for the greater part and largely be free from fear and free from want. And yes, we do have the disparity of wealth gaps and a lot of those different things, but we also have opportunity, like even if so many people reach out for opportunity and they don't find it, there's still at least that chance that you can reach for it. And even if you aren't sure to find it, you at least can have a chance to seek it. And that's something, Anyways, looking at the downtown of Washington, D.C. from the Capitol Mall, it's interesting, when you see the skyscrapers, like they're not super tall buildings, but they're kind of taller office buildings, and you don't really usually get that perspective when you see Washington, D.C. on TV or in photos, because the photos always are of like the monumental buildings on the Capitol Mall, not really so much the more modern buildings that are a little bit further away. I also thought it was pretty cool touching the granite of the Washington Monument and just feeling that smooth stone. Just like, I guess you look at it and you think of it like being like a concrete obelisk or something, but when you touch it, you realize like it feels like it's more smooth than I guess I was expecting. Stopped at the World War II Memorial, and I guess what stood out to me there is there's a lot of people there who are old people in wheelchairs, because a lot of them are probably old veterans who went there to see this memorial and probably to mourn the loss of their own brethren who have perished in wars. So, you have to respect that, what we call the greatest generation. And for that, I've just thought about how people say they were the greatest generation, and yeah, they did a lot of good, but I also think that past generations, for all of their good, have also had their own share of problems, and they've been guilty of being bigots, and they've been guilty of being closed-minded in their own ways sometimes. So sometimes it's just as important to remember that the new generations also have good in them, and we will look back in history and we will see current generations also do great things and courageous things to make the world a better place. It's not just those old guys in wheelchairs who fought in World War II that were great. It can be anybody, and I suppose that's a cause for a bit of hope. So we made our way down the reflecting pool, which is rather green and nasty, filled with ducks and algae, but also kind of pretty too. The weather was just so nice that day because it was cloudy, like started off slightly drizzly, like it was the perfect day for a Starbucks and just, getting up in the morning and being comfortable all day long. Like that was super, super nice. Definitely a pleasant contrast to the humidity that we have in the further down in the south and around Arkansas. And so I stopped at the Lincoln Memorial there, and looks like they're remodeling the Lincoln Memorial. So there's a temporary ramp up the front of it for the people who are not able to walk up the steps so they can get in. Meanwhile, underneath there, they're digging it out and adding a new museum and gallery underneath the memorial. So when it all is said and done, that'll be pretty cool. But while I was there, it looked like it was a bit tore up on the outside, but that's all right. There's Abraham in there, and the words of what he said in his address to the country at some point about getting along and making things right, and I guess abolishing slavery and finding a way to make the country get along with one another again. I guess he was all in all pretty good guy. From what I hear, though, he was slightly too skinny to get into the military at one point, and so he had actually eaten a large dinner of chicken before he went to go sign up to go in the military, because they wouldn't have accepted him if he was underweight. So I thought that was interesting. Anyways, as the afternoon started to drag on there in DC, I realized it's time to begin making my way back to the car. So I did that and hit the road and made my way all the way to Ohio, actually, before I went to bed that night. Just kind of drove through the evening and didn't make too many stops. I just got McDonald's right before I got in the car to leave Washington, D.C. And then after that, it was mostly just a lot of driving, Mostly what I had thought about this was just how different it feels. Like when you've been to a place and then you get on the freeway and you drive along and you see the road, like it feels different versus when it was just a place on the map that I'd seen. Got a few road shots, just kind of driving down the road and trying to capture a little bit of the look of the trees as they start to change into the fall colors. It's quite pretty in the northeastern part of the country. And then I stopped at this spot here, and that was very beautiful to look out over this big valley, and there's a church off in the distance, and very pretty. And I know it's green here in Arkansas, but that's just a little bit different. Kind of hit a little different. And so I stopped, and I thought that was pretty cool to stop and be able to look out over that valley just before sunset and take it all in. And then we stopped and looked at this here cutout going through the mountain, and that was a pretty nice shot there. Then the next day, it was on the road again, and I continued to drive from the eastern part of Ohio on into Indiana, and stopped in Columbus, Ohio, and then I stopped briefly, kind of just drove around a little bit in Indianapolis, and at least captured a little bit of the skylines of those cities, just because I wanted to be able to kind of get a feel for the gist of them. And I guess I don't know if I saw anything that seemed all that interesting, to be completely fair, about the cities of Columbus or Indianapolis, but I did think it was nice to at least see them, and I'll remember that they were there. And I do feel like it seemed like Columbus was a bit nicer. This here being Columbus was a bit nicer feeling city overall than Indianapolis, which seemed like a bit of a messy disappointing kind of a city to be in. I did not feel an urge to stop in Indianapolis. When I got off the freeway just to look around in Indianapolis, I saw a lot of tents and homeless people and what seemed to be suspicious activity going on. So, only so much of that do I have patience for. And there's a lot of cities like that where you just get into town and it's filled with that sense that there's homeless people and mischief going on everywhere. And it just makes you kind of feel like, you don't really want to be a tourist there. So you just drive on through. And that's one of those things. Like that's what messes up our country, I think, where we have this blight that makes its way in because some cities are doing better and better and better. They're getting nicer. And then there's other cities that are getting worse as time goes on. And nobody cares about them. And so you have like this weird contrast between places that are getting better and places that are kind of lost in a way. And so the recovery economically is not always fair and consistent. And so maybe there's problems, and then there's also hope too, because if a place is kind of forgotten and abandoned, then maybe there's room for recovery stories too. Anyways, as I was driving along, I stopped here. This was the Illinois state capitol from 1836 to 1839. For 4 years, that was the capital of Illinois. It ain't the capital anymore, but now just an old building, and it was pretty cool, though. So I stopped for a second there to stretch my legs, take a peek at it, and I will say I've come to rather like the state of Illinois. There's a prison past that prison. Looked at the water towers. I was wondering, why do you need 2 water towers? I don't know. But there's a prison. And then I look over to the other side, and there's some people parasailing. Kind of interesting contrast. Drove on through St. Louis. Always so beautiful to see the St. Louis Arch up here. St. Louis is kind of rising on my radar as one of my more favorite cities to go to. I think I like St. Louis better than Kansas City, to be honest. It's about 5 hours from Arkansas, where I live. So it's not super close, but it's also not super far. Like, you can go 5 hours. And my plan is, I'm thinking probably soon I'll buy a new car of some kind. Like, I was thinking about this Mitsubishi Mirage that I was driving across America. I never even gave that car any thought till I rented the thing and realized, you know what, like, this is an affordable, super efficient car. Like, I was getting like 40, 50 miles to a gallon with the thing, and it's super easy to navigate it anywhere. And I was enjoying the thing. So, and then I looked at the price of one, and like a brand new one is under $20,000. Thought, wow, I might just buy a new one. Anyways, so there's a nice shot of a little bit of harvesting going on. And I started off this morning going toward north of St. Louis to the confluence point where the Missouri and the Mississippi rivers meet. And I thought that was super cool because coming from Montana, I used to live very close to the place where the Missouri River began. And now, living close to Missouri, I'm able to see the place where the Missouri River ends. And this is that place right here. You look out there, there's that big old river merging with the even bigger Mississippi River. And it's crazy, isn't it? Kind of feels like a almost spiritual thing in a way when you think about how all of these waters are connected to each other, and reminds you that we all are connected to each other in various different ways. And I thought that was a a fitting and interesting way to conclude the official part of my journey by going to see the place where those waters met and concluding this trip and all of this traveling I've done over the last couple months, somewhere in the neighborhood of, I guess, like 8,300 miles of driving I think I've done. But I've seen, I've seen where the Missouri River began, and I've seen where the Mississippi River meets the ocean, and I've seen the waters of both oceans, and I've seen the roads that connect them to each other. And a few months ago, if I tried to draw a map of the United States, I probably would forget half the states in the country because I'd never been to them. But now I've been to or close to most of them, and so I guess I look at America with a little bit more of a familiar lens than I did before I began this journey. It's hard to say how those experiences change you, because you look and you say, well, I couldn't say as I'm all that much different of a person than I was before, and yet you would never trade those experiences because they do make you who you are. And when you look at the sum of all of those experiences that you've had, you realize somewhere along the way they did change you, and you aren't the person you used to be, because you're a more well-rounded person. You have a perspective you didn't used to have. And I think that's really what all of this is about. It's about trying to have a better understanding of what my place in the world is. And I certainly hope going to work on Monday and starting to, get back into a more normal routine and finding, new jobs, new connections, all of that stuff. I hope that I can take something meaningful with me from all of this adventuring. But if nothing else, I would say I've realized after a lot of time spent kind of just staying close to home and living a quiet life in Montana, I do want to explore places more and, hit the road and take cool videos and see places I haven't seen before, and hopefully share those experiences with others, because it's just such a enriching experience to see something different. And maybe it won't be super long trips like what I've been doing, but it could be just 2 or 3 days. Like this trip, if anything, like it really, this week, it puts into perspective, you don't have to take a super long time to have an experience. Like I was gone for just a few hours, actually, 86 hours parked there in that garage at the airport, and managed to see New York and DC and another 1,300 miles of American countryside and cities in between. And it's been a blessing to see all of it, and now it's a blessing once again to be back home. In any case, as always, wherever you find yourself, good luck on your adventure. Till next time.